Hello, everyone. Welcome to Grid Live Pre-Race. Joe Sammiego here, along with Amanda Kaufman, and from Formula E Zone, Edward Hunter. Big thank you to our Patreon subscribers, calling the show Mark, Robin, and David, our newest one. You too can invest in the Grid Network through Patreon each and every month. Help us pay the bills, get to the track, and especially we're less than a month away from the NASCAR Xfinity Series in Portland, and then a little over a month away from Formula E coming to Portland. And of course, you could do a one-time contribution through Buy Me Coffee or buy us multiple cups of coffee. Any investment in the Grid Network is appreciated, and especially you like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon on YouTube so that way you don't miss any of our programs. And as I mentioned, Formula E coming to Portland. They're just 2 races away. Amanda, we had a very exciting Formula E Monaco E-Prix race.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely an amazing race for the ABB Formula E World Championship. Plenty of passing, and at the end, Nick Cassidy, 2 in a row, and now the points leader. So, question for you, Ed, is Nick Cassidy rising as Pascal Wehrlein is falling off the pace?
Thank you very much, Amanda. Yes, it's great to be here. So it was a very, very interesting race. Nick Cassidy qualifying 9th and making his way through the field. And in the end, getting to the lead, maybe being a little bit lower in energy than Mitch Evans behind him. And then it was Jake Dennis behind, who was probably the fastest of the 3, but didn't have the track position right at the end. And then what happened, unfortunately, was there was 2 safety cars. There was a crash between Dan Ticktum and Sasha Fenestrez, and Ticktum's front wing was sort of a bit wonky and falling off and rubbing against the front tire. And then Dan Ticktum got passed by Jake Hughes, the pole sitter, who had been basically leading most of the first 7 laps of the race and using up energy and then having to save it in the middle of the pack. And then Maximilian Gunfer caught up behind and tried to pass up the hill after Saint-Devote into Beau Rivage and hit the back of Dan Ticktum. There wasn't really a space for Gunfer to go into. So Gunfer retired, caused a safety car, and this bunch of the pack up, and obviously they got released again. And then with about 5 laps to go. Okay, so there wasn't any added time at the end. And then there was another crash with about 1.5 laps left to go, I think, between Nico Müller and Sam Bird. Nico Müller, who unfortunately was running in the points again, a strong race for Abt, actually, even though he's missing the front wing, got put into the wall, damaged his steering, and he was about on the spot. And Sam Bird also lost a place to Stoffel Van Dorn, surprisingly. The amazing thing about this race, both DS Penske drivers got disqualified from qualifying for, I think, tire pressure infringements. The tire pressures were too low on the reading, and so they had to pass pretty much the entire field, got up to 7th and 9th, I think, in the end. So it was a pretty impressive drive from both John-Eric Verne and Stoffel Van Dorn. Ultimately, that final safety car meant Mitch Evans, even though despite his level best efforts, couldn't really get back in front of Nick Cassidy. And in the interviews we just put up on Formula E Zone, Mitch Evans says, "I wish I defended harder in that near the final quarter of the race or so, because in the end, that was what cost me, not having that track position when I really, really needed it." As for Pascal Wehrlein, let me answer the actual question that was given to me by Amanda about 5 minutes ago. Pascal ended up qualifying quite badly in the middle of the pack with his teammate Antonio Felix da Costa. And yeah, you see the results on the right, just next to me here. We've got, of course, Nick Cassidy, Mitch Evans, Jake Dennis, your podium finishers. Pascal Wehrlein, I believe, just finished 11th outside the points. In the end, there was a bit of drama and contact in the middle of the pack behind Norman Nato, who unfortunately ended up retiring. Between him, Eduardo Mortara, Lucas Di Grassi, Stoffel Van Dorn. And there's Pascal Wehrlein. He did get promoted to the final points paying position in the end because, I forget who got a penalty. I think it might have been Sam Bird for that. Yes, there we go, for that. And 16th Sam Bird for that collision with Nico Müller that I mentioned earlier that caused the final race-ending safety car. And even though it's interesting, I'm reading a lot of articles saying the race, what an anticlimax, but we got a lot of action in before then. I think compared to most Formula One races at Monaco, I would say definitely I wouldn't describe it as an anticlimax whatsoever. But yeah, I think Pascal Wehrlein getting very unlucky. His teammate suffered even worse. Da Costa got a puncture while getting his way up to 8th, I think. And Wehrlein just sort of got caught in the melee, lost a bit of his front wing fighting with Sam Bird, unfortunately. And in the end, Wehrlein just comes away with 1 point, but loses the championship lead by quite a margin to Nick Cassidy, who has been absolutely exceptional the past few races. So it's not really a surprise. Anyone's watching the last few that things have turned out the way they are, but it's certainly a big fall from grace for Porsche and Pascal Wehrlein. They're definitely going home with their tail between their legs today.
Yeah, Porsche just seems, it sort of reminds me a little bit of what we've seen in some other series where the points leader, maybe they're trying to be a little too conservative because they know points are very important, try to get the points. Very surprising because that was the first time I saw the updated results with that Sam Bird penalty. So that means in the grid ranking, Pascal Wehrlein is going to get 1 point. That's going to help him out as well. But it does seem like Nick Cassidy, this team, they are starting to run all cylinders. They're looking really strong. 2 wins now. Getting the points lead. I don't see what could really stop them because they're the same as Jaguar when it comes to the powertrains. I know earlier in the year when Pascal Wehrlein had a strong start, we talked about can the powertrain, can the development keep up? Starting to wonder if that's become a little bit of an issue as well too. Jake Dennis, he's starting to rebound after having so many races with no points. Now coming off with the 3rd place, and I have to agree with you. And when people talk about this, not exciting finish. This was a very exciting race. I saw Formula E said 116 overtakes in this race in Monaco, where we know that's always really hard for another series we'll talk about later on. This race, despite it ending under the safety car, and I know other series we'll talk about overtime rules, extended laps, Formula E decided not to extend the race any. I just thought this was a really thrilling race. And just overall, I think Nick Cassidy, that team, the Envision team, they are showing they're the real deals and they're going to be contenders for this championship.
Absolutely. Oh, sorry to interrupt, Amanda. I just wanted to finish Joe's point. But yeah, like you say, 116 overtakes. In Berlin, we had something ridiculous. Like in both days, we had over 300 overtakes with cars running side by side for like the first 20 laps, pretty much, and like 4 wide. Couldn't really do that at Monaco because the space literally just isn't there. But we did see Nick Cassidy do a brilliant round the outside move on, I think, both Jake Dennis and Mitch Evans at the hairpin, where just the space opened up and it was very opportunistic. So I think the overtakes here in Monaco were a little bit more meaningful than some of the ones we saw in Berlin. And I think that's probably why the reaction overall has been so positive to this, despite, some of the, it was an anticlimax. The other thing about that, Nico Müller was right on the racing line with a damaged steering, with a wheel pointing the wrong way. So didn't really have any option other than to call the safety car for that final lap, because otherwise everyone would have steamed into turn 1 and just hit Nico Müller, and it would have been absolute carnage. So Scott Elkins, race director, reacted very quickly and made absolutely the right call, in my opinion.
Yeah, definitely an exciting race. And like you talked about, plenty of passing, plenty of contact as well, and which left quite a few surprise drivers without front wings and hanging parts running all race long, really. So Dan Ticktum ended up with the top 10 finish, but it's sort of amazing that his tire didn't blow, but no call to come to the pits despite the damage. We know F1 has the repair flag, NASCAR has the black flag and damage clock. So question for you, Joe, are you surprised that Formula E officials didn't call some of the drivers to the pits with hanging parts?
I was, especially Dan Ticktum showing their 6th place finish. He was running really well all race long, got a little bit back with all the shuffle going on with getting the attack mode, so some of the aggressive driving. I really thought he was going to come into the pits, change the front wing, go out, just try to salvage something and hope for some sort of craziness to get some points. So when I kept seeing it, he was like, wait a minute, he's still being shown. And then we had that last crash at the end where Nico Müller essentially, brought out the race ending caution. He was running with no front wing. We saw a lot of debris all over the place. Sam Bird also had damage as well too. So I was just really shocked that we didn't see the black and orange flag like you do in F1. We didn't see a call, you need to come in. I just felt like, especially in F1, we know in the past where we've seen Haas, just a part looks loose, you got to come into the pit, repair that nose. Overall, it was really surprising, and I can understand you sort of expect with Formula E, the beating, the banging, some debris scatter around the track. It's almost like sometimes I feel like there's more beating and banging in Formula E than there is in NASCAR. But still, I really anticipate Dan was gonna lose that spot. Happy for him and that Neil team to get that top 10 finish. That team has really come a long way. But it just did surprise me a lot. I don't know what Ed has to say, but it was a big surprise that he wasn't called to, hey, you can't be running like this.
Yeah, I got my lucky near free shirt on, so maybe that helped ticked him out today to get I think equal best finish with top six because he finished sixth in Cape Town early this season as well. And it's an interesting debate, I guess, because in the first season, and we've always had spec chassis in Formula, it's always been not very particularly aero dependent. So I think that's what it's not like you will dramatically lose performance if a bit of your front wing is hanging off. You might probably be okay, actually. And even with the rear winglets, they don't do a whole lot, admittedly, other than have like flashy LEDs on them. But it was interesting because in the original Gen 1 back in 2014, 2015, 2016, you would often get lots of the meatball flag, we call it, black flag with orange disc in the middle. And it's the same in Formula One as well, where if there's a bit hanging off that looks like it's about to fly off and hit someone in the face, as you see Buy Me a Coffee link just coming up with a familiar name at the very top of it. But yeah, I encourage you to do that if you enjoy the show, by the way, because it definitely helps the guys at Grid Network out. I'm sure they appreciate it. And they appreciated my one because they told me. But where was I? So effectively, it used to be very draconian where if the wings were hanging loose, bit of the wing that was hanging loose, even if it wasn't falling off, you get the drivers calling into the pit lane to put a new front wing off. I remember Berlin E-Prix 2016, Sam Bird was running top 6, top 7, looking to get good points and got very upset because he got shown into the pit lane and it basically ruined his race because he was given the black flag with the orange disc. So the attitude has changed. The cars have changed to be probably a bit more punishing and the wings more likely to fall off in contact, but it's not quite the be-all and end-all that it used to be. With Tictum, he wasn't the only one, of course. Mortara had got completely beaten up in this race. Buemi as well. It was quite a contrast seeing Nick Cassidy's clean, pristine car crossing the line to win, and then Buemi going side by side with him a bit after they both crossed the finish with like a bit of a winglet missing, scratches all over the green car. So a big contrast there. So Buemi in the middle of the pack didn't have as easy a time of it. But we saw the sequence of events with Tictum was that he hit the back of Sasha Fenestraz, who was cruelly denied a pole. I thought he had a brilliant effort to get pole, and got for a technicality as a technical infringement, he got it sort of taken away from him. Ended up having to start second, of course, which was still really good for him in Nissan. But Dan Tictum hit the back of him, bit of the front wing, obviously came off and was rubbing against the front tire. And as I was saying earlier, he went uphill and basically was struggling to get to top speed because when you've got front wing rubbing against the front tire, it limits how fast you can go, of course. Gunfer tried to go for a gap that wasn't really there, caused a big crash, and I think either under the safety car or just after, Dan Tictum rubbed against the back of Jake Hughes, who was in front of him. And basically, he said in an interview that Jack Pickering did, it dislodged. I was a bit cheeky, but it was able to get the bit of the wing that was rubbing against the tire off. So I wasn't as dangerous after that. So it was a little bit kind of touch and go, quite literally, for Dan Tictum. But I think that is literally the only reason he escaped punishment. And to be honest, at Monaco, there's so many narrow, low-speed corners where the pack bunches up that kind of contact in Formula E, especially, it's kind of inevitable at a certain point that drivers are just going to go for gaps that might suddenly close, or the energy management is such that especially near the end of the race, you've got guys that have saved a lot and guys that haven't saved as much, that when they're jostling for track position so much, that these sorts of things are inevitable. So I think there's an argument to be made that maybe there should be more safety cars to clear debris up rather than just when a crash happens, because there's been a couple of times this season we've talked about that. Hyderabad comes to mind, where Jake Hughes got a bit of debris caught in the wing mirror, actually got in his steering wheel, and so that basically he was stuck driving to the right, and that basically took him out of the race because he just got stuck in his steering wheel. And we had a similar thing with Oliver Rowland today, actually, where his wrist was damaged. He had to come in to retire because he crashed into the back of Mortara at the chicane, the Nouvelle chicane, and basically there was a big impact because these cars don't have power steering. And we saw it with Robin Frijns earlier this year. He had a massive injury that took him out for like half the season. Then he's only recently come back and took that brilliant pole in Berlin, of course. But yeah, so that's definitely a big thing, that these Gen 3 cars, when you hit the back of someone unexpectedly, it really makes a big impact, and you've really got to be mindful of that. And unfortunately, Oliver Earl, hopefully he's okay, but was the reason he had to retire, because the pain in his wrist was literally just undrivable for him. So those are for a few things we've got to look out for, but certainly a lucky escape for Dan Tickton, but not everyone in the field was as lucky today, that's for sure.
Yeah, hopefully he'll be able to make a speedy recovery and get his wrist back into shape before the next round, where the ABB Formula E World Championship is going to Jakarta for a doubleheader on June 3rd and 4th. Then on to Portland in Joe's own corner of the world for the last few races of the season, with only 4 race weekends left. Does the intensity pick up in which drivers and teams need to step up to keep their championship hopes alive in these last few races here?
Oh, I didn't realize the intensity ever dropped down at any point, Amanda. But yeah, there's certainly the obvious team that needs to sort of get on top of things is Porsche. And I think the big thing today that really compromised their race was that they didn't qualify especially well, had a really difficult first lap, and Da Costa, I think, went from one point from 18th to 8th. But the problem is that if you get into an incident, and Da Costa got a puncture today, which really destroyed his race, and we saw Wehrlein getting into contact, that it's not that the car's slow. We saw Dennis finish third today and set the fastest lap as well with the same powertrain behind him. We saw Andre Lotter in the other Andretti get spun around. He won't be in Jakarta, of course. He'll be racing in World Endurance Championship. So David Beckman, a young German driver, is stepping up to replace him for that weekend, that doubleheader in Indonesia. So I would say also it was great to see Nissan doing almost get up another pole position, and they did with their customer team, McLaren. And then Sasha Fenestras 4th today, JQ's 5th in the McLaren. So I think Nissan really needed those points, so that's good for them. Of course, obviously, Neo 333 getting more points with Dan Tickton, and some interesting things going on. I think like we talked a little bit about Muller earlier today, I think it was a big opportunity to score a couple more points. And when points are quite hard to come by, they've only scored 5, 3 for Robin Frijns' pole, and Nico Muller scoring 9th last time out in Berlin as well. So Abt really need to obviously, Mahindra not doing too well either. So both Mahindra-powered cars, the Abt and the Mahindra, having a bit of difficult time recently, where the efficiency of the powertrain and the pace really in qualifying just isn't quite there. But certainly the teams that are on a roll are the Jaguar power teams. Andretti with Dennis starting to get his groove back a little bit and scoring more podiums. DS, I think Penske actually had a really good recovery today. I think we could see Penske and Maserati back in the mix. Maserati had a really difficult result in their home race. They were in the mix in qualifying. So I think the team to beat really at the moment, it's no longer Porsche. It's definitely the Jaguar powered cars of Mitch Evans, who nearly won today, and Nick Cassidy, who did. And as I say, has been absolutely superb. It's no surprise to see him now 20 points in the lead ahead of Wehrlein. So Wehrlein needs to hit back. I think the Porsche can hit back, but they need to just ace these last few races. I say last few, I mean last half of the season. We've still got quite a few to go, but we're getting into crunch point in the championship. I really think, in all honesty, it's between the top 5 of Nick Cassidy, Pascal Wehrlein, Jake Dennis, Mitch Evans, and Jean-Eric Vergne, of course. I think all 5 of them are in the form of their life at the moment, apart from maybe Wehrlein, who's had a few bad races in a row, but I think he could easily strike back because he's that sort of top quality. And I think Da Costa was a bit unlucky today. Could maybe get back into it, but he needs more drives like we saw in Cape Town, where he went to had a brilliant drive from, I think, 8th on the grid to victory. So you don't necessarily need to qualify well, but at a track like Monaco, if you qualify badly, it can really expose just get you into all sorts of carnage, as we saw for the Porsche drivers today. So Jakarta, a little bit of a wider track. I think it's going to be a bit more like Berlin, where we see nobody wants to lead until the last 20 laps when everyone decides, right, we need to go and get on with it. So I know this is a long rambling answer, but that's my thoughts, I think. And I think it's going to be a very, very entertaining run-in. And I honestly think Nick Cassidy is the favorite now, with maybe Mitch Evans and Pascal Wehrlein close behind in second and third in the points. So Cassidy, if he can just keep getting those podiums, then I would be no surprise to see him lifting the world title, world championship trophy by the time we get to London at the end of the season in a few months' time.
As you said, the Jaguar powertrains, Nick Cassidy, they're all looking strong. I have to agree with you when it comes to Porsche, they have to step it up. They just seem to be not where they were compared to earlier in the year, where they just seemed really hard to beat. And we were talking about Pascal Wehrlein. How far can he get ahead in the points championship? Well, now he's behind again. So it's going to be really interesting to see what they could do. Antonio Felix da Costa, I will say him and Sam Bird, I feel, along with that top five, those two, the top seven, they have to step it up if they got any shot at championship. I feel with Sam Bird, it just seems some races he's hit or miss. Antonio Felix da Costa, a couple races of bad luck, but if he could put on that great drive where he did get the win, he could be really hard to beat. I was really surprised with some of the passes, especially on the outside of the train stop hairpin. Really exciting stuff. Overall, one team I feel I don't see them being a championship contender, but I'm just surprised because they've seen the pace. They're fast. Just seems like bad luck. The Maserati MG team. I mean, they were both in the top 10, and then Montara, bad luck. Gunther, the contact, putting him up on the wall. That team just cannot seem to have any good luck going.
Yeah, and it's such a shame, Joe, wasn't it? Because they got Gunther got the podium in Berlin and then top 6 the day after, and it was looking like they'd finally turned a corner. And then today, it just all went wrong in the race, and Mortara's made a punching ball for everyone else, and Gunther, in my opinion, kind of clumsily just slamming into the back of Dan Ticktum. Maybe he didn't realize that Ticktum had the problem with the wing hitting his front wheel, but it felt like a lot of good points went begging today. So James Rossiter, it's back to the drawing board for him as team principal, and he's got to regroup the team going into Jakarta.
Yeah, and Montara 20th in points with only 5 points. That has to be the biggest shock considering.
Yeah, he was second in the points last year as well. No, third, sorry. He was third, but second the year before. So he was always in the top 3 last couple of seasons with Venturi. And since they've become Maserati, it's been kind of a bonfire of a season for Mortara, where it's either score a couple of points or bin it, seems to be the Mortara strategy at the moment, sadly.
Yeah, tough break for Maserati. I think they have to really step it up if they have any shot. And of course, Jakarta, a couple of weeks' time, the beginning of June, the 3rd and the 4th, doubleheader. And then we have Portland, E-Prix, June 24th. Very excited to have that event right here in the Grid Network backyard. And of course, very excited again, Edward, for your time to be on the show. We encourage everyone, link in the video description to Formula E Zone, so that way before you log off after the show has ended, check out there. Especially, it sounds like you got interviews from. It sounds like Jack was over in Monaco this weekend.
Yeah, both Jacks, Jack Pickering and Jack Gianamana. And in fact, we have a third member there as well. I'm the only one not there. Someone's got to edit the videos. And speaking of which, I better get back to that, Joe. So thank you very much and enjoy the rest of the show. I believe it's Formula One or NASCAR next. Joe will know, and I won't.
It is Formula One, because we know for everyone tuning in, they're still going to be coming up to practice shortly. And of course, a big thank you to Edward for his time. Amanda, qualifying is later today, so we don't have the starting grid to show everyone like we normally do. And we saw from the practice yesterday, pretty interesting. Max Verstappen, I thought he was going to be the fastest, looked like a Max Verstappen getaway, but we saw the 2 Mercedes up front in the first practice. Second practice, okay, there's Max Verstappen, but then the 2 Ferraris. Mercedes, a little further behind, Sergio Perez 4th. Amanda, do you see potentially a non-Red Bull pole this weekend in Miami?
Yeah, like you said, we saw flashes of what seemed like potential speed from some teams that were maybe a little bit unexpected to be on pole, such as Mercedes in the first practice and then Ferrari a little bit later on. But still, it seems like Red Bull has the dominant pace here, and this seems to be, like all other tracks we've seen so far this season, a track suited to their car. I think that the only way for it not to end up as a Red Bull pole We did see a lot of drivers struggling and going off during practice, and I think that if Checo or Max were to struggle a little bit with the repaved circuit, even though this is a permanent course, it's still very new, and there's a lot of potential to go wrong. But I think it's pretty solidly safe to say that we can probably expect to see Red Bull on pole this weekend again.
I think I have to agree with you because I was surprised with that first practice. Then the second practice, okay, looks like Red Bull, but I think, as you said, and then especially as we get to Charles Leclerc, I think this track is going to really suit that Red Bull. And what's scary, they're talking about how with the Red Bull, potentially more upgrades since Baku to unlock the potential of that car more. It's like Baku, they looked really strong, hard to beat. This track, we don't exactly have the long straightaway like Baku, but it might be something where it still will be best for Red Bull. Hopefully, the best we'll see for Sergio Perez. Of course, outpaced Max last race weekend at Baku. This weekend, 11th in the first practice and 4th in the second practice behind the two Ferraris. Perez, really, he's the only driver this weekend that could leave with the points leads besides Max Verstappen. But consistency seems to be one of his weaknesses since he's joined Red Bull. It seems when he has a win, he cannot make it two in a row. He has not done that in his career. A couple times he's gotten some podiums, but then there's been times where he got a win out of the podium the following weekend. If Perez does not get a podium this weekend and Max Verstappen does win this race, does this significantly hurt his championship hopes?
I think that for Checo to be able to be seen as a true challenger to Max and week in and week out, he needs to be able to lock down a little bit more consistency. And I think that could come in the form of a win this weekend as well to make it two in a row. And I think that would give him all the confidence he needs to be a serious challenge to Max and take this championship battle to him and kind of add some legitimacy to his campaign for the championship. I think that if he doesn't pull out a win here, it does, I think even just in terms of morale, it might hurt his championship hopes a little bit. Watching Max pull away with the championship, I think that he's done a great job so far already this season in keeping things tight, keeping things close. So I think that for Checo, consistency is the key to his success. And I think that means not only being on the podium, but also finishing ahead of Max in more than one race this season.
Needs to do that more than one race. I also feel you brought a lot of good points. One component I'm always curious about within the team, we know a lot of times if you have two drivers almost equal, the team will not be that much in the role of, okay, this is our number one, this is our number two. I feel if Checo does start to fall behind, that could become more of an issue. Whereas now, we all know Max Verstappen is, in theory, the number one driver. But if Checo could really show, hey, I'm faster, I'm ahead, get that preferred strategy to get that win, could make life a little hard. But I have to agree with you. I feel if he doesn't get a win here, doesn't get a podium, Max gets a win, podium, or even the fastest lap makes it a sweep, that could really be a setback. And especially once we get to that point where Sergio Perez or whoever's in second place cannot get the points lead. When that points lead is within reach of each race, I think that's the best opportunity for Sergio Perez. And of course, Charles Leclerc, he is not in position to get that points lead anytime soon, but he is gaining points again. But we saw in the second practice, he went into the wall. I was surprised. Car got loose, locked up straight into the wall. The commentators were talking about if he had gotten off the brakes, he would have avoided the wall. But then we also saw the Haas, I believe Nico Hulkenberg, go into the wall too. Pretty hard hit. Last year, we know Sainz hit the wall, and he said that was one of the hardest hits he's had in his career with the wall. Are you surprised? This is a temporary circuit. We have some slower corners, but it seems it's still challenging to where drivers are hitting the wall, and overall, it just seems, I've just been surprised. It just seems this is a lot more challenging than some drivers may have anticipated.
Yeah, it seems like practice was definitely needed for a lot of these drivers in the fact that we saw so many of them go off, lock up and go off. And like you said, Hulkenberg and Charles were in the wall at different points, and a few others had a few close calls. I think that drivers are very much still getting up to speed, and teams are still learning the track. It was repaved again this year, so it's slightly different from last year even. But I think that the purpose of the repavement was to add a little bit more grip. But it should be interesting to see how it plays out. But I think that I was definitely surprised to see how many errors or just times that drivers were off and seemed to be a little bit uncomfortable going around the circuit during practice. So I think it should definitely make for an interesting qualifying.
Well, very interesting qualifying indeed. A mistake by a driver that could, of course, always send him to the back, but that red flag coming out when somebody's on a pole sitting lap, that'll be a tough break. It's going to be really interesting to see what happens. And in this race, I feel last year it was a little bit exciting, but towards the end it became clear who was going to win the race. This year, I feel like seeing what we've seen so far this year, Max Verstappen has to be a favorite, but I anticipate we'll probably get a safety car. I think there's going to be some hard racing. Last year, I would call it was, I believe, Pierre Gasly that had the car fire with the AlphaTauri or Yuki Tsunoda, one of those two. But I anticipate at least a safety car. I don't think it's going to exactly be a runaway. It's going to be really interesting. Formula One tomorrow, and of course, tomorrow after Formula One, after NASCAR will be on the air. So be sure to subscribe so you don't miss our Grid Life wrap-up show where we're going to recap both races. And of course, a big thank you for Ed for recapping the Formula E race with us earlier today. Now, Amanda, the final race of the weekend, NASCAR Cup Series, they're going to be at Kansas, the Advent 400, in which case, very interesting scenario. We got a team that's going to try to make 3 in a row at one track. It's been a while since we've seen that occur. We know there's some teams like Hendricks, Martinsville, they always seem to be really hard to beat. But now, 23-11, they won here with Kurt Busch. Then they won here again with Bubba Wallace. Now they got Bubba, Tyler Reddick. Tyler has a win already. Bubba, he seems to be really strong in this track. His last race win right here. Do you believe 23-11 can make it 3 in a row? And is there any driver you feel has the upper hand?
Yeah, so it's definitely a tough one. Like we always say every week, NASCAR can be more and more unpredictable, especially with the speedways. I think that Bubba and Reddick definitely have a chance here. I think that this would be 23-11's chance to make this track their own, the way that we associate Martinsville with Hendrick or other tracks with other teams. I think that for Bubba to win here, it would definitely be the boost and turnaround that his season needs. I think that Tyler already has some good momentum going, but yeah, like you said, Bubba's last win did come here, so maybe it's wishful thinking, but I think that we'll see how it goes tomorrow, obviously, but I think that this could be the track that Bubba and his team prepare well for and know how to win here, and maybe they could go back-to-back here this weekend.
Back-to-back will be huge for that team. Get it? Of course, Bubba in the number 45, but still for 23-11, back-to-back-to-back. Bubba good doing back-to-back at this track and securing himself in the playoffs. That'll be a huge morale boost, as you mentioned, and potentially we talked about quite a bit. That momentum you earn when you get that win, it just seems like you start riding really confident knowing you got that win, whether it's your first win or the first win of the season behind you. Go out there, try to get more wins. Definitely changes up the strategy when it comes to that. Now, one topic a lot of people are talking about, it won't impact the strategy for the racers because we know all the racers, they have the same goal. Try to go out there, get the win, get into playoffs. But everybody's been really talking about this NASCAR bracket challenge that Denny Hamlin brought up on his podcast, Actions Detrimental. Some of the key matchups we're seeing here, Ty Gibbs versus Austin Dillon. Of course, There's been some big surprises like Kyle Larson. He's out in the first round, but Chase Elliott as well. A lot of people thought he would advance over Ross Chastain. That didn't happen. But this matchup, Ty Gibbs, he's been doing some really good races this year for his rookie season. Austin Dillon, I feel he's having a typical Austin Dillon season. Some races he's towards the front, some races he's not a factor. Which driver do you believe has the advantage right here in Kansas?
Like you said, it's kind of a tough one, Joe, because they seem to be almost evenly matched in predictability in the sense that Ty Gibbs seems to be slightly overperforming for his rookie season versus Austin Dillon seems to be flying a little bit under the radar and either running towards the back or having a good race where he's running towards the front, but not making too much headway in terms of challenging the people who are typically up front or having much consistency to his season. So this is a really tough one to pick the advantage, and I'd be curious to hear your answer too. But I think that I'll have to go give this one to Ty Gibbs, and just I think that he's got a little bit of momentum. He's hungry. He has a lot to prove, and I think it'll be interesting to see. It's already been interesting to watch him this season and some of the moves that he's pulled out and the way he's been able to really keep up with some of the leaders at times. So I think for both of them, really, it's a matter of consistency. But I think that I'll have to hand this one to Ty Gibbs.
I think I'm going to agree with you. I feel Ty Gibbs, I'm more convinced that the Toyotas are going to come out fast this race weekend. Joe Gibbs Racing, 2311. Probably some additional excitement with the news that are going to have more Toyotas next year with Legacy Motor Club. Get to that in a little bit. Richard Childress Racing, I feel Kyle Busch, this is a track where he has some success. He doesn't have some success as well, depending on which race, what year. Austin Dillon, I just don't feel this is going to be a track that will suit him. I'm going to go with Ty Gibbs as well. This one I think is going to be really interesting as well too. Harvick, Byron, they're paired up. You got an upcoming star with William Byron against Kevin Harvick, of course, one of NASCAR's 75 greatest drivers. Who do you see with the upper hand on this one?
Yeah, another tough matchup. I think that this one's really hard, but I think I'm just gonna have to give it to Byron based on what we've seen so far this season, based on the consistency, based on the momentum that he seems to have been carrying. I'm gonna have to go with Byron over Harvick on this one, even though I'm sure Harvick has the potential to prove me wrong at any time. So yeah.
I think this one I'm going with Happy Harvick. I feel he 23, Stewart Haas Racing. They have some races they come off really strong, and they're just somewhere it's like none of them are having a good day. Usually Harvick's the lead one. I anticipate the Fords are going to be pretty fast here. We haven't talked about Penske Ford, but I think they're going to be up front. I think Kevin Harvick will be that lead Ford. William Byron sometimes just seems bad luck gets him when at least the least worst time, especially, and he just drops down. I think Harvick is my pick for that one. I think that is going to be really interesting to follow. And then two Toyotas in this bracket challenge, Denny Hamlin, Martin Truex Jr., who's just coming off that win. Denny Hamlin, so searching for that first win of 2023. Who do you see advancing in Denny Hamlin's own challenge?
Yeah, Hamlin created the bracket. I think that in his own challenge, it would be I'm guessing he wants to obviously come out as the winner, but Truex, like you said, coming off of that first win for himself of the season, Hamlin still winless, and a little early in the week I saw Hamlin was sort of complaining about the shakeups that have been happening within the team in terms of pit crew, and didn't feel as comfortable with the pit crew he has now and his lack of being able to control the race. Whereas, like we said, Truex is coming off that win, which can lead to some momentum. But I think I'm going to have to give it to Hamlin. I think I'm going to maybe this is no surprise, but I think that he has the ability to, despite any hurdles such as switching pit crews, to be consistent, and he knows how to run near the front. And he has been running near the front for most races, but has been caught up in some bad luck. Whereas Truex is kind of a little bit more sneaky and sort of comes as a surprise in races like last weekend, where he kind of just runs more towards the middle, sometimes at the front. Just depends on the sort of day that Toyota's having. So I think that in this head-to-head matchup, I'm going to give it to Hamlin.
I'm going to agree with you. I feel Hamlin. It seems Martin Truex Jr. before the win, people didn't really saw him as somebody that was going to go out there to win. They always talk about Bell, Hamlin. Truex got up there, but of course Dover, one of his best tracks, side of his first career win. Kansas, I just don't see that momentum going the exact same way, especially when you got Christopher Bell, Denny Hamlin, the 2311 Toyotas. I think they're going to be all ahead. I'm going with you as well, too. Denny Hamlin, I think, is going to advance in his own challenge, advance further in the bracket. Of course, after this race, the NASCAR playoff bracket, the one that everyone racing is trying to get in, is going to be potentially filling it up more. A significant moment where we got 16 spots. Already, half of them have been claimed by race winners. Christopher Bell, Kyle Larson, Ricky Stenhouse Jr. at the Daytona 500, Kyle Busch, Martin Truex Jr. last weekend, William Byron, Joey Logano, and Tyler Reddick. When it comes to this race, we get another first-time winner, more than half. I feel we're behind the pace compared to last year where we had 16 different winners. When it comes to this year, if we get another first-time winner, so then more than half the playoff grid is taken, do you see that happening? Or do you think we're going to have another repeat winner again here at Kansas?
Well, it's always a little bit impossible to predict, but I think that some of the names that haven't won yet, Bubba, for example, Hamlin hasn't had a win, are obviously hungry to clinch those playoff spots. But I think that this, like you said, could be a weekend where the Toyotas come out strong. And if the Toyotas are strong, then that also puts Bell as a factor. And yeah, Reddick as well. I think that it's a tough one. I think that I would have to say that I think it's a chance that we see a first-time winner, maybe in the form of Wallace or Hamlin. So I think that there's definitely, I'm going to give it 70% chance that there's going to be a first-time winner for the 2023 season.
Wow, 70% chance. I think I'm going to agree with you. I feel, I think we mentioned Bubba Wallace, 2311, Denny Hamlin. Really, I feel like if there was going to be a repeat winner, it would probably be from the Toyota camp or Kyle Larson, maybe Byron, Stenhouse, Kyle Busch. I don't see them exactly being contenders. Martin Truex could prove us wrong, of course, and Joey Logano at the Fords. They're going to be, I think, up there too. So yeah, I think I'm going to go 70% with you as well. When it comes to one driver hoping to be that ninth different winner this year, Ross Chastain, but the last couple of race weekends, Ross Chastain has not been making friends on the track, including last race weekend, sending a car into the wall and then collecting Kyle Larson. Tough break for Kyle Larson. He was not happy. He slowed down Ross Chastain as he was trying to catch up to Martin Truex Jr. in the closing final laps. Now that we're coming to Kansas, do you think Ross Chastain is going to be in trouble considering some of the attention he's getting? Do you think some of the drivers are going to be raising him much harder compared to the past race weekends?
I think that Ross Chastain is definitely starting to build up a bit of a reputation in terms of how he's racing. And it's no secret that there are quite a few drivers who have spoken out against the way that he's racing them, and kind of goes back to what Kyle Busch said weeks ago about citing a lack of respect within the paddock or within the way that some of these drivers are racing. But I think that he's aggressive and he's going for it. So I do think that it could hurt him in scenarios where he's coming up against some of these guys and they're changing the way that they're racing him due to some of the ways that maybe they have felt that he raced them unfairly in the past. So I think that he does have to be a little bit careful not to develop a negative reputation that would lead drivers not to want to work with him on track. So I think that Chastain could be in a little bit of trouble here.
I think Chastain could be in trouble here as well too, especially if we get into closing laps, a late restart. I think there are going to be folks trying to really, if they see there's Chastain, they know how he's raced people. I think they're going to be a little aggressive when it comes to getting that win. I put it this way: I don't think Ross Chastain is going to be my pick a winner, which is pretty much what we have in the show. The hardest game, pick a winner.
Yep, time for, like you said, the game harder than the lottery, seems lately. So, as always, we encourage everyone to comment your picks for pick a winner for F1 and NASCAR, our remaining races of the weekend. So, opportunity to get some points here. And it looks like Ed is still leading the field, but nowhere is still quite a few races left in the season to be able to move up and gain some spots here. So we'll start with you, Joe. How about you tell us both of your picks, first for F1 and then for NASCAR?
Oh boy, F1. There's side me that says safe route, Max Verstappen. Yeah, and I think I'm going to go with that way. I think I'm just going to go with Max Verstappen. I just don't see him. We talked about this track to be tricky. I don't see him making the mistake where he ends up in the wall. If something does happen, I think it's going to be something where bad luck, poorly timed caution, or somebody gets into him during the start if he doesn't have the exact great start and somebody has a much better one. For the NASCAR Cup Series, I'm going with Christopher Bell. I just feel that team, they are been solid almost each and every week in the top 10 so often. They not be leading the points because Ross Chastain's ahead of them, but I just feel Christopher Bell will be my pick for pick a winner. Excited to hear what are your two picks.
Yeah, so for F1, I'm definitely going to have to agree with you. I think when I was watching practice and I saw a lot of drivers going off and a few ending up in the wall, I kind of thought to myself, this is the perfect track for Max, and that he's so precise and consistent and he doesn't easily make errors that would end his race. So, and he's fast. So I think that Max is a safe choice once again this weekend for F1, barring some, like you said, poorly timed safety car flags that would hurt their strategy. But I think even then, Red Bull kind of has it locked down. And then for NASCAR, the hardest series of them all to pick. I think, like I said, I was leaning towards a first-time winner for 2023. I want to pick Hamlin, but some of the things he said, that revealed how uncomfortable he is with his pit crew and has been unable to lead the race or control any of the races, is pushing me towards Bubba Wallace for a repeat here this weekend. And I think that he's hungry for that first win of the season and also has a great crew behind him. So I'm going to go with another Toyota in the form of Bubba Wallace.
Bubba Wallace, I think, has to be one of the favorites for this weekend. It's going to be very interesting to see how it all turns up. And of course, we encourage everyone subscribe to us right here on YouTube. Hit the thumbs up icon, like, and that notification. Those two steps will ensure that you don't miss any of our programs and help us grow our base. We're up to 610 subscribers. We're trying to get over our goal of 1,000 before the Indianapolis 500. Looking really close, but definitely encourage everyone to subscribe. And of course, invest in the Grid Network as these fine folks have done so. We appreciate all their investment from them, as well as everyone from Buy Me a Coffee. Links in the video description for both of those options. Be sure to visit gridranking.com, our website. You'll learn more about the history of the grid ranking, and of course, some of our newest articles, including Amanda's recap of Formula One race weekend. I know we're very excited to see your recap for this race weekend, and of course, all the series that we cover as well, including Brandon was World Endurance Championship, which is part of the Grid Endurance Performance Index, and will be on the air tomorrow following the races. For Joe Samaniego and Amanda Kaufman, thank you for watching today's show. We'll see you next time, and enjoy the races. Thank you for watching us right here on YouTube. Be sure to subscribe and check out some of our other videos, including Life on the Grid, where we interview folks from the motorsports industry. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.